The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
So I've been thinking a lot about how I want to present this show over the last 6.5 weeks of the NBA season, because to me, we've had a sort of the paradigm shift of the season happened coming out of the All-Star break this year. And I don't know if this is the same exact timeline every season, but it's the timeline this year. And for me, that timeline is this is when you stop only tracking the best players available. This is the moment where you can officially, and it might even been a little bit earlier, where you turn your attention now to ROI almost exclusively, outside, of course, of Keeper and Dynasty leagues. And I was tweeting extensively about this, and I mentioned a bit on last week's podcast, but what I decided is, and there's no way for me to know exactly what your team needs might be. This is up to you to figure out. We've talked about it many times on this show, and I'll do it again because you never know who may not have heard it on previous episodes of Fantasy NBA Today or previous seasons, those of you that are new to the show this year. And that is basically, if you're in a head-to-head league at this time of the year, you're game planning for playoffs. Not necessarily playoff schedule, although that's great and all, but in the playoffs, unless you can get a pretty equivalent player or someone that excels in roughly the same categories as the guy you're trading away with a better fantasy playoff schedule, to me, those trades are overvalued. I got a guy who's going to go 3 games in this week, and I could trade for a guy who has 4, but if he has a totally different stat set, it can throw a wrench into what your team is accomplishing. At this point in the year in a head-to-head league, I think you basically have to start whittling down the categories that you're really attacking, because you now know the other teams that are going to be in the playoffs. You can look and see what they've been good at or what they will be good at if you were to tackle them head-to-head right now. And fine, there's a possibility that if you have to go through 3 rounds of teams, you might face a team that's combined over those 3 rounds. You might face a team that's good in every single statistical category. So it also behooves you to be good in every category because you take advantage where your opponents are weak. But to me, if you can maybe move off a category a little bit and sort of whittle down what you're approaching, I think that's helpful. And I think you figure out how you can really strengthen 5 out of the 9 categories in your head-to-head league at this point in the year. That's what you're hunting for. You're looking for somebody that's going to be really good the rest of the way. If you're in a roto league, and this is what we talk about more often on this podcast, there's more roto discussion than head-to-head. It's more what I aim for. I think that I like head-to-head leagues. I have a few of them going. There's something nice about sort of being able to hit the reset button every Monday, where if your team was just awful for a week, it's sort of in the rear view. You move on to the next one, where, in a roto league, every good week, every bad week, they all add up and they all end up costing you. So how do you approach these things, I guess, is the strong question. What do you do to make it all work in a roto league? For me, it's averages. And I will stress this constantly over the last few weeks of this show and of this season. The averages. Go to your league standings in your roto page and figure out, because I assume you're at a games cap. If you're in a roto league without a games cap, you got to change the settings immediately. Immediately, because that's crazy. Change them, fix them, whatever you got to do. You compare yourself to the other teams in your league based on where you would be if you were exactly tied up with those teams in games played. And then you can figure out, and I don't want to give a ton of my strategy away, and frankly, I don't know if people that are in this particular league are listening to this podcast, but if you are, hello, everybody. I'm in a league. It's 11 teams. We switched over from regular to keeper style, and we lost a team, and then we gained 2, and blah, blah. And anyway, and when all was said and done, we ended up down 1, I think, or up 1, whatever. It's 11 teams. You don't need an even number in a roto league, which is another nice thing. So if you have dropouts, you don't need to immediately replace somebody. I went through and I calculated averages. It occurs to me that the one team that might actually be listening to this is probably the team that's going to win this year. So what's up, dude? I go through, and one of my ultimate strategies is I plug in the averages of every single team in the league in every statistical category. So you plug in, and our good friend Neil Rochlani helped me sort of streamline. He sleeked it. He turned it real modern and fun. My Excel spreadsheet, which was quite clunky and bulky, but it worked. And Neil helped me kind of streamline it a little bit, where I'm plugging in the exact games played of every single team in my league and the numbers. Basically, if I could just cut and paste things from that standings page and paste it over in an Excel sheet, that would be the simplest way to do it. And then this Excel is going to tell me what every single team in the league is averaging on a per game basis in each statistical category. And what I found out, and without getting into too deep into the specifics here, because you guys don't really care about what I'm doing in my own league, but just how this applies, is I found out that my team sat at 3.383 assists per game logged. And that was, amazingly, and this is the magic of an 11-team league, everything just gets a little bit tougher, 3.383, which is seemingly relatively high. In fact, that same exact value would place in 6th place in a 12-team league, and I believe it places in 8th in a 10-team or an 11-team league. So you need to be better. But that's not the point. Here's the point. I sat at 3.383. The team right in front of me was at 3.39. Very much within reach. That team, by the way, had played 70 more games than my team. Really difficult math to try to work out because they were sitting some close to, let's see what the number would be. Run the numbers really quickly here while I'm doing a podcast. About 240 assists behind, roughly, and a 70-game difference. So you can figure that out. You can divide 240 by 70. You can see exactly what you'd need to average to match them over that stretch. But it's easier to do it this way, where it's just running the numbers for you every night. Okay, 3.383. Here's the beauty part of this. I don't actually need to catch up 70 games to figure out if I can pass this guy. I could figure it out in a day. 2 days later, I ran the numbers again after a strong game from Chris Paul. I think he had 16, 17 assists with Harden out. And who the hell else did I have on that team? Somebody else had a really nice assist game. And suddenly, my joint jumped from 3.383 to 3.429. It was a big leap. I'm still, this is an important footnote, I'm still let's see, what's the exact number here? 217 three-pointers behind total that other team. That was at 3.39. But now I know that if I just keep up this pace the rest of the way, I'm ahead of that dude. That dude's going to run out of games, and if I just stay the course, I will pass him and gain a point in Roto. That's a pretty cool advantage to have. I also figured out, not only just that the team that's 2 slots ahead of me was at 3.47. The team 3 slots ahead of me was 3.52. And the team 4 slots ahead of me was at 3.53. Which is not an easy leap to make. 3.38 to 3.53. It's 15 hundredths of an assist per game, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you already have 650 games in the tank, that actually does take a pretty good amount to shift the numbers right now. But that is far and away, of all of the categories, all 9, that's the one where I am most closely bunched with teams in front of me, where a little push could actually net my team 4 Roto points. So what did I do? Well, I went out and I dropped some centers that I'd been promoting on this show, who I still think are actually good choices, like Streaming Boban or Jahlil Okafor. Dropped them, because rebounds, I'm basically tied with one other team, but then there's nobody anywhere near me in the front or behind. There's almost no way I can fluctuate by more than 1 point in rebounds the rest of the way. Things would have to change dramatically for my fantasy team. So the ROI on rebounding is a big fart. Don't care. The ROI on assists, 4 points, moves me from 4th place into 3rd place and 1 point back of 2nd place. So that category could leap me from getting my buy-in back to making a few $100s. Do that is my lesson to start this Monday show. Welcome to Fantasy NBA today, everyone. I am Dan Besbris. We're 10 minutes in before I even told you who the hell I am and what the hell this show is. But you know what? I thought it was important, so that's what we led with. This is ROI time of year. You need assists? You bulk up on him. I don't even care if the guy you're picking up is no good. Want to know another example from this league? I just dropped Marvin Williams, who I adore. I adore Marvin Williams. How much have I talked about him on this podcast? He's been outstanding, but guess what? I'm in third place in averages on threes per game, and there's no one anywhere near me from behind. I could literally take a week off from making three-pointers, and I'd still be in third place. So Marvin Williams, what's he to me right now? He's threes and low turnovers. I'll find that somewhere else. He's some rebounds. I mean, I got these other guys that I picked up. I scooped up Thomas Bryant after his big ball game. My guys are fine. I had JV coming back from being injured and getting traded. I picked up Enes Kanter. Rebounds are fine. I don't. This is covered. ROI, people. ROI. Reverse chronological. Should I edit that out? Nah, we'll leave it in. Reverse chronological lightning round, friends. That's how this Monday show goes. We're going to blitz through Sunday, Saturday, and if necessary, Friday. I don't know. It might actually not be necessary. I think there were exactly 15 games between Saturday and Sunday, so it may have actually accounted for every single team in the NBA. I think it did because everybody played twice, Thursday through Sunday this week, and I don't think anybody went back-to-back over the weekend. We'll figure it out as we go. It's not that important, actually, and I don't know why I wasted your time with it. Orlando at Toronto. The Magic coming out guns blazing in this one. Terrence Ross in particular. Jonathan Isaac, 3 threes, 2 blocks. He had his one down game, and now he looks fine again. Nick Vucevic, 23 and 12. His terrific season continues. Toronto tried Marc Gasol in the starting lineup, and it didn't go great right here out of the chute. Serge Ibaka moved to the bench. He still played 24 minutes. Gasol got 23, which to me is a good sign moving forward. They're going to try to integrate him. If you bought low, I think that was probably a good decision. Gasol in the mid-20s is more than enough to get the job done because his energy level is going to be up, and he should be a top 50 guy the rest of the way. If you're on Serge Ibaka, I don't think you panic. I think there are going to be days where he gets up near 30. There are going to be days where he's in the 24 range. He definitely takes a hit in all of this because Gasol is going to be seeing more minutes than Jonas Valanciunas would have, but he doesn't get destroyed entirely. I told you I wasn't interested in Jeremy Lin. Despite Freddie VanVleet being out, I continue to not be interested in Jeremy Lin. OG Anunoby got the start in this ballgame because Kawhi Leonard sat it out, and that will end in the next one. Clippers blown out by the Denver Nuggets. This really pulls into focus the issues I have with the Clippers right now. They have way too many bodies on that team, and not enough of them are good anymore. Okay, plenty of them are good, but not enough of them are great. Tobias Harris was a really good, bordering on great basketball player. Lou Williams is a pretty good basketball player. Gallo is a pretty darn good basketball player. Those guys remain. Montrezl Harrell is solid, but unspectacular at times. He's inconsistent in his minutes. He picked up 5 fouls in this one. Ivica Zubac, who, I don't know, everybody was throwing a party for the Clippers getting him. I've been watching this dude for a couple years now with the Lakers, and I don't know why people were losing their minds for him. He's just not that great. He had a couple of good ball games with LA, and I'm going to say I kind of warned you guys, but Landry Shamet, another guy that I thought as he cooled off, his situation would devolve a little bit. And then Patrick Beverley is sort of the only other guy on this team I'm trusting. His usage rate is frighteningly low, 3% in this ball game. He attempted 1 shot in 25 minutes, but he did have 6 boards, 4 assists, and 2 blocked shots. So he continues to do stuff in other statistical categories. You just want a 3-pointer mixed in there. That's all you're asking for, Pat. Just a couple of shots. That's all you really want. For the Nuggets, Paul Millsap now has taken back over the power forward job, which is good if you were hanging on to him this whole time. Obviously, Jokic is in good shape, and Jamal Murray in general will be in good shape. This is a blowout game, so the minutes were a little bit off kilter. The stuff that's starting to now creep into the mix is the Gary Harris, Malik Beasley timeshare, the Will Barton, Monty Morris rotation. Isaiah Thomas logging 24 minutes in this blowout win. Isaiah Thomas in 24 minutes actually has a shot at fantasy value. I'm not saying he's a pickup. He's far from it. And, the field goal percent for him, I don't know that it gets up this year anywhere near statistical relevance. And he's way over-owned in fantasy leagues. People sat on this dude all year like he was going to have a massive role for the Nuggets, and I just don't think it's there. But, points leaguers, you keep an eye on him. I think that's the one spot where maybe he could creep into it. Guys like Malik Beasley, Gary Harris, Monty Morris, they all end up sharing minutes a bit in these games, and that's the disconcerting stuff. Weird one out in New York. Can't figure this one out. DeMar DeRozan was good. LaMarcus Aldridge was good. And everybody else was flat out awful for the Spurs. Just terrible. Knicks shot 51%. Damian Dotson scored 27. Mitchell Robinson had 15, 14, and 5 in 30 minutes with DeAndre Jordan out due to a sprained ankle. I mean, he's going to win you leagues, people. And I'm saying this in a non-hyperbolic fashion because he single-handedly won me blocks this week. I went up against a team in one league that just had the week of their lives. I mean, everyone on this dude's team went totally freaking crazy. Dwayne Dedmon had 11 blocks over these All-Star weeks. He had 9 in his last 2 ball games. If I didn't have Mitchell Robinson, 18 blocks over these 4 games, I wouldn't have stood a chance. I would have stood a chance. Did I get that right? No, maybe 16. Was it 16? Doesn't matter. It's freaking amazing. This dude's going to carry you. He's going to carry you. So that's pretty cool. Enjoy, ladies and germs. Enjoy. And just, hope he doesn't take too many free throws. Because otherwise, he's a gold mine, man. Wonderful. It's incredible stuff. Dennis Smith Jr. had a nice ball game. Emmanuel Mudiay had 19 points, but only 19 minutes. Kevin Knox got his minutes back up. Luke Cornett, DNP, so he's a very safe drop at this point. And no, I don't trust Damian Dotson because with this Knicks team, you're getting sort of different stuff on a night-to-night basis. Dotson's had a few good ones in a row. I'll give him that. He's played 31 minutes or more in 3 of their last 4 ball games, so maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there. 16, 13, 20, and 27, the scoring totals for Dotson over these last 4 games. Looking at the guys the Knicks have out right now, there really isn't anybody that could steal that job from him. The guys that could take it are already there. Alonzo Trier presumably is one of them. If they decided they ever wanted to do Mudiay and Dennis Smith Jr. on the floor at the same time, anything can happen with old David Fizdale, but he's going crazy right now. Dotson's hit 13 three-pointers in his last 2 ball games. He's scoring at a high clip. He's taking a lot of shots, which is sort of all you ask for. His fantasy stat set is not particularly good. So we're not going to get carried away because defensive stats are severely lacking. He doesn't pass very much for a guy who's listed as a guard and playing, he's 25 minutes on the year. He's averaging 1.5 assists. That's not very good. 3.5 rebounds, also not very good. But if you need scoring, maybe he fills that void a little bit. He's way out on the periphery for me, though, so let's not jump ahead of ourselves too much. Saturday, 12-game card. This is a whopper, so we'll take our time plotting our way through this one. First one, early game on Saturday. Portland blowing out Philadelphia. Boban was terrible. He was good the previous day, or the previous ball game, I should say, and he just was awful in this one. He couldn't keep up with Yusuf Nurkic or Enes Kanter. I still think you could stream him until Embiid comes back. I think he's more likely than not to have a productive game if Joel is out. But if you're looking for a longer-term solution, he's obviously not that. On the Portland side, I think we have to be pretty thrilled with the first 2 games from Kanter. In these 2 games with Portland, he's logged about 21 minutes per game, 20 and a half or so. He's averaging 17 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2 assists, half a block, no steals. to be expected. He's made about 90% of his free throws over those 2 games, 80-something%, which is generally where he's been for his career. He's shooting in the 50s and 60s range over those 2 games, and that's all you need. We only need 20 or 21 minutes out of him, and if they get caught up in a true blowout, maybe he even gets to squeeze a few extra minutes out. So there is some upside here. I'm a big fan of what he can do in Portland, and I think he should be on a fantasy team. Mo Harkless is playing well, but, man, you guys know I've had the Harkless watch going on and off all season long. He's not trustworthy enough. As soon as you think he's going to get enough minutes to be useful, it trends down hard because of his knee stuff. So I'm not buying into it. I would rather take a shot on Jake Layman, who does lack in at least a handful of categories, but he's showing some blocks upside that I personally did not know was there. He's blocked 9 shots in his last 4 ball games. Problem is, the other stuff is fairly non-existent. He has 3 steals over that stretch. He had an 11 rebound game his last time out, but he has 2 total assists in that span, 5 threes, although goose eggs in that department in his last 2 ball games. And on the year, he's a 73% foul shooter. Very low volume, so maybe that number comes up if he plays more, which he has been lately. But to me, he's a guy that you throw in there if you want someone that's sort of forward eligible that can steal you a few blocked shots. That's the Jake Layman experience right now. I'd rather have Kanter. I know I love blocked shots, but Kanter's percentage is so strong. Indiana winners at Washington without Miles Turner. Hopefully he'll be back for the next one. No real news on this thing. Wesley Matthews is playing big minutes at a low usage clip. I'm still not really buying on that one. The Washington side, on the other hand, was ripe with interesting little factoids and tidbits. Number 1, Bobby Portis moved into the starting lineup and turned into a ghost, which I'll loop back around to my thoughts on that in a moment. Number 2, Jabari Parker, not surprisingly, after a few games where he was going full bore with his new team, well, the bar has been dialed back to less than full. He did have 2 steals and a block in this last game, but 7 turnovers, not good. They've lost 4 games in a row after this brief honeymoon period with their 2 new guys, including losses at Detroit and at Charlotte, fairly winnable games for a team if they're still really trying to make it. And he, what's the word I'm looking for? Sucks? Yeah, that's the one. Just kind of sucks. So move along from that. Number 2, Jeff Green only played 20 minutes in this ball game. He didn't play well, so I would go ahead and presume that that's one of the big reasons he didn't get more minutes in this game. But then we turn our attention to the positives. And the positive here, and I don't expect this number to keep up, is the mighty Thomas Bryant, who ended up playing 31 minutes off the bench in this ballgame. 31 off the bench. That's not a number that he's hit particularly often. He played 32 against Milwaukee on February 6th and 30 back on January 27th. When he gets to that number, the lines are huge for him. But we can't, in good conscience, expect Thomas Bryant to play 30 minutes on a night-to-night basis. He'd been sitting, sadly, in that 16 to 19 range every game, seemingly, with the exception of these very few and far between kind of intermittent explosions he was putting up. One of the differences in this ballgame, and I don't know if this is going to stick, but again, we're talking about a guy that in 19 minutes a game is averaging, he's number 107 in 9-cat. So he's really right on the edge and has been for a couple of months now. And if you happen to catch him in one of those weeks where he does get his weird 30-minute outburst, well, over the last 2 games for Thomas Bryant, for whatever that's worth, well, no, actually, that's the last 3 games, I think. Am I getting this number right? No, lost 2 games, including one real stinker. He's number 57. And if you go back the last 4 games, he's number 85. All it takes is that one big game to totally change things for a guy. Why do I think there's a slightly better chance that his numbers can improve? Well, to me, coming off the bench might be better for him. He can get more involved in his time on the floor. He can be a little bit more of a feature guy with the second unit. And do they really want Bobby Portis? Is this going to become a more traditional rotation for this team? I just like the idea that he's no longer on the floor with Jeff Green and waiting on Bobby Portis to come take his job, because at any moment they could just move Green to the 5 or throw Portis into the game. What I like now is that Bryant comes on when Green and Portis are getting towards the end of their energy tank. So he comes in with basically like an unadulterated run until those guys have enough energy to come back in. And if he's playing well, he can just stick around a little bit longer. And that's what we saw in this ball game. Do I think there's any chance he plays 30 minutes in his next ball game? I think 0. Okay, like 1% chance. So it could happen. Anything can happen. But I basically don't. I'm going to say on record here, he's not. He's not going to play 31 minutes in their next ball game. My target is 20 to 22. If he can get over that 20-minute mark, he's inside the top 100 because his percentages are excellent for a center. 54%, shooting from the field, 64% on the year for Thomas Bryant, not 54, and 80% at the foul line. So great percentages. He'll walk into about one blocked shot in those 20 minutes a game, half a steal, minimal turnovers. He might knock down a three-pointer every now and then. It's intermittent, but what he'll do is he'll help you in a bunch of places without hurting you. So I like him for some potential upside. I scooped him not with the expectation that this is going to stick, but with the very low probability chance that if it does, he's a guy that could be a game changer. He has that fantasy potential. And those guys just don't come around that often, the big-time game-changing types. But there is another one in the very next ball game, and this is the one where, listen, we all miss. I miss plenty. I thought that the Mavs would actually play Maxi Kleber after the All-Star break, and they really haven't, and maybe they still will. But they look like they're tanking to me, and so I think we can safely pin it on that. Phoenix, on the other hand, this is one where I got something right, and I got it right early too. Not right out of the chute, but shortly thereafter, meaning basically as early as people needed it. And I don't get these moments very often. I was actually texting with Brewski over the weekend saying, I'm so happy I really got this one. I was sort of out on a limb by myself in a weird twist. There's these moments where you're like, all right, there's guys that everybody's watching and you take a stand on one side or the other. And this is a guy that I think pretty much everybody had written off after a couple of bad games with his new team. And that guy is Tyler Johnson. And you guys can go back and you can look at it. And on Friday, I sent a tweet out that said, guys, I know that this is crazy, but Tyler Johnson is due to hit 60% of his shots for a couple of games. I don't know if it's going to happen this year or this month or this week, but it's going to happen because they're force-feeding him minutes. He's getting a truckload of them, and he hasn't been scoring, so he's been flying under the radar, and his shooting was so abysmal in his first 4 games with the Suns that, really people had totally written him off. But he was averaging 30 minutes a game in those contests, and in these garbage games that Phoenix tends to play at times, even though his scoring was so horrible, he was averaging something like 6.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, half a block. All of the other stuff actually looked pretty good, which is this weird, kind of semi-analysis that you have to do with a guy after he gets traded. Okay, yeah, first game with Phoenix was awful, and then it was 9-5-3, 3-4-5, 5-8-5 with 2 steals and 2 blocks. But in all of those games, he was 7 for 34. That's 20%. And so I'm like, okay, look, this is a guy, he's not a high percentage dude. He's a 43% field goal guy over his entire career. So, fine. It's never going to be massive, but he's not going to shoot 20% forever, especially not on a team that's just as soon as you're wide open, just fire. Screw it. Get it and go. He's not a great foul shooter, but he's not going to kill you there. He's sort of a very slight negative. And if you go back a couple of seasons when he was just starting to break out a little bit in Miami and they gave him that absurdly bloated contract, he was averaging about 1.4 steals per 36 minutes, 1.4, 1.5, and about 0.8 blocks. So there was this weird defensive upside that we all thought maybe he could hang on to if given the opportunity and time. And that's what jumped out to me in this Phoenix time. They are loading him up with minutes. He's averaging 31 minutes a game with Phoenix, including those first few games where he didn't play quite as many, and now suddenly 33, 34, his last 2 games. He's their point guard now. And if anybody ever gets shut down on that team, if Devin Booker gets shut down, we already know TJ Warren may or may not play, who knows? Any extra opportunity is good. He's going to take his 4 to 6 3-pointers a game, and he might have a week where he makes 3 out of 18 of them. But he might come back and hit 12 out of 18 the next week. And suddenly, the day after I tweeted, this guy's due for an explosion. 29, 5, and 4 with 2 steals and a block. I picked him up in a bunch of spots as I was sending that tweet out. So I was like, this guy's about ready to cut loose. They want him on the floor. And we know that Suns basketball generates a lot of fantasy numbers. They don't play great defense. They get out and they run. They take a lot of early shots. I don't know that he's going to take 16 shots a game. That feels like an extraordinarily high number. I think you're probably going to see more in the 9 to 10 range on a nightly basis. So, 10, 5, 4, 1.5 steals, half a block to 0.7 blocks, 1.5 3-pointers. This guy suddenly profiles as slightly better than a late-round guy. Like a top 90 type of dude. Which, again, you're looking for... It's not Thomas Bryant level upside, where, again, if Bryant plays 30 minutes, he's a top 50 guy. If Tyler Johnson plays 32 minutes, he's more like a top 80 guy. But that's a pretty good guard to be able to pick up out of no place. And he was not heavily owned. I was able to grab him in almost every spot I wanted to, any spot I wanted to, prior to those big games. So I think you got yourself an interesting little cat right here. Mikal Bridges was sent to the bench late last week. He played 34 minutes off the bench in this game anyway, and he had a very Bridgian line with 6 points, 2 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 3-pointers. He missed a bunch of shots, or it actually could have been an even bigger ball game. I still love him. I think you're holding on to him regardless of whether he's starting or coming off the bench. They're just better with him on the floor, and they know that. And this one really hurts me. It really hurts me, and I know you guys are going to tweet at me about it, but I sent a note out over the interwebs over the weekend, and I will back it up here, and that is, I think it is time to drop Richaun Holmes. I love him with all of my heart. He's a big-time hoop ball guy. His per-minute numbers are just amazing, but his 19 minutes per game has dropped to closer to 14 to 16 lately, and that's just not enough in a regular 12-team format. You get yourself one of those deep 12-teamers or a 14, it's a different world, but they really want DeAndre Ayton on the floor as much as his body will allow, even if it means it's costing them ball games, because he's still learning how to play defense. Holmes is the better defender between the two right now, but they don't want him on the floor long-term or for long minutes. Ayton is their guy. He's their backup, and when Phoenix was still sort of using Richaun to settle things down, that was a good time to own him, and I'm sure there's going to be a game coming up where Ayton gets into foul trouble. But in these other ones where he's not in foul trouble, Ayton's playing 34 minutes, and that's too many for Richaun Holmes to hold his value. So it kills me to say it, but it is that time. Dwayne Dedmon for the Hawks, still rumbling along right now. He's been kicking ass and taking names. Taurean Prince, who played really well, is now expected to miss a game due to personal reasons. I'm not buying it yet. I need to see this a couple more times to think that Prince is somehow rejuvenated. Obviously, this is coming with Kevin Huerter out with an ankle sprain, and we don't know his exact timetable, which brings us to the last name on our Atlanta Hawks list, and that's Kent Bazemore, who has slotted right back into his old role of 32 minutes a game with Huerter out, 23 points, 5 boards, an assist, 2 steals, a block, 5 3-pointers. He's a gorgeous fantasy asset with no Kevin Huerter. So here's where I stand on this one. And it's a weird spot to be in, and it's one that I've found myself in many times over the years. You have a guy in Kent Bazemore who has clear fantasy value. We know he does. It's fairly straightforward. He's a guy that when he gets playing time, he's a top 75 guy. Easy. Right? Well, okay. He was trending down hard. He was playing 16 minutes a game when the Hawks were healthy. They didn't seem to have him in their plans. How do we accommodate for that, knowing that there is at least a decent probability that when Kevin Huerter comes back, Bazemore's minutes are going to get cut in half again. Well, I think what you have to do with a guy like Baze, and with any guys that have portfolio, that have proven fantasy ability, is if they're playing really well in what appears to be a streaming opportunity, you sort of have to grab them in the hopes that it sticks. That's, to me, the only way you can really play this thing. You have to grab him in the hopes that it sticks. Because if he somehow holds his minutes here, we know he's going to be a productive fantasy player. And if you pass on him because it seems like he's probably just going to be a streaming guy and he's probably going to go back to being Herter's backup when the Hawks are healthy and they can play all their young guys, if we miss out on it under that very reasonable assumption, and maybe there's a 60 to 70% chance that that's what happens, but on the 30 to 40% chance that, oh, well, you know what, maybe let's just keep Baze in that 22 to 26 range instead of 16. I think he's a top 90 kind of guy, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And then we missed on it because someone else was like, oh, man, this drives me so crazy too. Because I know the guys that, and I don't think this is the case with Bazemore because we're at a spot now in the year where some teams are starting to tune out the games. But you know you have those teams in your league that just log in like once every 2 weeks and they click on who's the hottest recent player and it's like, oh, Kent Bazemore. And they pick him up and they put him on their team and then he just keeps the job. And you and I are sitting around like, yeah, he's just streaming right now. I don't think he's going to keep this job. So we just let him sit there for 3 days. And then Joe Schmo at the end of your league grabbed him just thinking, hey, he's hot. I think he's the guy. And then they end up holding on to a great fantasy asset all year. Oh, I've kicked myself many times for that particular situation. So in this instance, for Baze, I say pick him up, stream him until Huerter comes back, and then hold him for a game or two after Huerter comes back to see if he can hang on to his minutes. Because if he does, you're going to want to have him. If he doesn't, you cast him into the ocean. Hopefully you have a spot on your roster that you can use on a guy like Baze right now. Because there is a chance, a possibility, that he could creep back up into the range that we want. The Lakers, mostly LeBron and Kuzma, a smattering of JaVale McGee. Brandon Ingram has been a little bit better lately. Yeah, he's playing a little bit better, but still a terrible 9-category fantasy guy. Lakers are a tough team to figure out fantasy-wise, folks. Reggie Bullock, there's a chance he could do something. Maybe. I don't like to chase on this team very much. I think LeBron, Kuz, and probably McGee are your safe bets in 9-cat. On the Pelicans side of this basketball game, I do think there's something to discuss. Number one, Anthony Davis, they sat him on a back-to-back. Etuan Moore, they also sat on a back-to-back. And Darius Miller is out with an ankle sprain right now. And then what we saw is Drew Holiday still played 33 minutes, even though we heard his numbers were going to get dialed back. Julius Randle played 38, Elfrid Payton 36, Kenrich Williams 35. Those are the guys that got over 30 minutes in this game. How does that get impacted when Davis, Moore, and Miller are back? I honestly don't know. I really don't know. The Pelicans are a total roll of the dice right now. Jahlil Okafor started, but only played 13 minutes in this game. Cheick Diallo had a really nice game, 18-10, went a couple of blocks on a perfect 8 out of 8 shooting, but he only played 19 minutes. What if he got a full allotment of minutes in this ball game? I get the feeling that right now, and this was a different kind of game because they were playing the Lakers, but I get a feeling right now that the Pelicans are looking to evaluate everybody on the team that isn't locked in long-term. They have, I believe, the opportunity to re-sign Jahlil Okafor. So I think they sort of know what they have with him right now. Guys like Kenrich Williams, Cheick Diallo, Elfrid Payton, Frank Jackson, potentially Darius Miller when he's healthy. These are the guys that they, I think, want to evaluate, and it means that everybody's just going to get 25 minutes on some nights, and that makes us a really difficult team to handicap. So, no, I'm not racing out to pick up Diallo. Okafor is still on a bunch of my teams, but I'm also willing to drop him for somebody that appears to have a clearer path to minutes. It seems like Elfrid Payton is going to get a lot down the stretch, and Kenrich Williams seems worth owning, although his minutes could get cut in half if they decide he and Darius Miller are playing the same spot. So I would watch the next game very closely when presumably most of these guys are healthy, and then we can make a call. But I'm also not that worried about missing out because it seems like it's going to be a different dude every night. And you know what? If somebody guesses right on the guy that sticks, the not obvious one, I should say, then kudos. But I have a limited number of spots on my roster, and that's why I'm using them on guys that I think have a better probability of hanging on for a while now. So a guy like a Tyler Johnson or someone with insane upside like a Thomas Bryant. Whereas, yeah, I could probably make a move on a Kenrich Williams. I'm guessing he's likely available in at least a couple of leagues that we're all in. I don't have his... What's his ownership? I'll look it up while we're talking about him. Only 29 still. Yeah, so he's available in at least a couple spots, even in competitive leagues. And he has an okay fantasy stat set. It's not overwhelming. Obviously, he's been playing well lately. He'll hit some three-pointers, he'll get you some rebounds, a couple of assists, some steals maybe. It's nothing overwhelming, right? So, yeah, I think there's a chance there. But what if Miller takes his spot? How do the minutes get adjusted? His feel relatively safe, but I don't know. And that's why I'm willing, by the way, to move on from Jahlil Okafor so quickly. I think this is a time of year where you look for a guy that's guaranteed minutes, and I don't know that he is. I thought for sure he was with this Anthony Davis saga, but here we are. Nothing of note on the Brooklyn side. The Charlotte side, Nick Batum has actually been okay for a couple games in a row. Jeremy Lamb and Miles Bridges were both bad in this one. Tony Parker actually was the guy who got hot for Charlotte. You guys know I mentioned on a pod last week, I'm not that excited about Miles Bridges. His stat set isn't quite there yet, and I'm not dropping Jeremy Lamb. This was obviously a very poor ball game, a little bit of a wake-up call for him. If Charlotte thought that this change was going to drastically impact their fortunes, it appears that it's not. They can try what they want, I guess. I'd love to see Lamb back in the starting lineup, and I'd love to see him take more than 3 shots in his 19 minutes. Go get some looks up. Kemba's not going to take 28 every night. Tony Parker's not going to take 16 every night. I maintain that I think there's something with Jeremy Lamb. Don't panic yet. Memphis and Cleveland. This is probably the last one that we're really going to spend a bunch of time on. I think we can move through most of the other games at a decent clip at least. Jonas Valanciunas, oh baby, 29 and a half minutes, 25 and 11 with 2 blocked shots. It's going to be a fun run the rest of the way for Big JV. Got some questions about Joakim Noah, 16, 7, and 4 with a steal and a couple of blocks, and he's always had the ability to put up kind of rounded fantasy lines, even when his minutes are not massive, but he has some pretty big issues with his fantasy game. Number one, he actually gets to the free throw line, and he's a career 70%er, so that's going to hurt you. He's a center, but he's a career 49% shooter from the field without any three-pointers. You always would hope that a guy taking that many looks right in front of the rim would actually make 51, 52%, so he doesn't help you as much as you might hope. You got to go all the way back to 2013 to find out the last time that he was really a net positive in almost any statistical category. There were some years in there with the hurt with Chicago, a little bit with New York, where he was grabbing about 9 rebounds in 20-something minutes. To me, he'll give you the rebounds of an Enes Kanter and a little bit better defensive stuff, but his percentages are whack, and he'll get you a couple of assists. I'm not that thrilled about it, you know? I mean, he's so old from an NBA standpoint. He's been so banged up for so long. Is 24 minutes really enough for us to get excited about Joakim Noah? I don't think so. Delon Wright played better in this one and rendered Avery Bradley unusable. I think those two guys are going to be trading off, so I'd rather pass them by. Justin Holiday has moved back into his very low usage role, and that is probably not going to work. So you're looking at JV and Conley. Definitely not Ivan Rabb. I know he's starting, but he needs a good 30-something minutes to be fantasy relevant. Wright and Noah are the guys you keep an eye on with this team. And then obviously any news on Kyle Anderson or Jaren Jackson Jr., because they're both just sort of out right now. And are they out for the year? Maybe. But also maybe not. I think with Slow-Mo, you could probably move on. I think he would have a really nice role if he got back healthy with this team. But the shoulder stuff, whatever it is very nebulous. And I don't know that he's playing again. And then JJJ, I know they're going sort of gingerly with him here, but I think they'd like to give him a few more games down the stretch. So I would hold on there as long as humanly possible. The Cleveland side, yes, we got 30 minutes out of Ante Zizic, largely because they wanted somebody to bang with Jonas Valanciunas. That meant Larry Nance didn't get as many minutes as usual. Cedi Osman, he's back. He played 32 minutes in this game. Colin Sexton had a better ball game. This will do, right? Like if he gets defensive stats and some three-pointers mixed in, then that's a pretty different dude, but I'm not buying into it outside of points leagues. And then, of course, the big news in this ball game, Kevin Love, 26 minutes, 32 and 12, a steal, a block, and 6 3-pointers. He made all 8 of his free throws, and he's slowly rounding into shape, folks. The 26 minutes for him were a high since coming back. I would assume he'll be in that same range tonight. They play tonight, not tomorrow, and they have a couple of days off, so maybe 26 minutes tonight, and then maybe they get him up to 28 in that game in New York on the 28th of February, and maybe that's where he maxes out. But you know what? That's more than enough. If he's out there just going to work in his 28 minutes of ball game, he took 15 shots in 26 minutes, He's not going to be bashful. So this could be fun. And you guys heard me on all these shows. Everywhere I went, I said I'm oddly optimistic about how much Kevin Love plays the rest of the way, and I remain as such. He really wants to be on the floor. They're going to have to figure out how to lose games while he wants to play and help them win. And I don't know what they're going to do on that front. But, you get another bad team like Memphis, and you might accidentally beat somebody. Detroit blew out Miami, so the minute totals for most of these guys are a little bit off kilter. Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond logged more than you'd expect as they finished the third quarter. My guy Wayne Ellington exited midway through the third, and they just never needed him to come back in. I still think he averages more than 3 3-pointers the rest of the way. If you need that, that's a guy for you. If you don't, he's not. Simple enough. On the Miami side, Hassan Whiteside decided to have a nice ball game the day I decided I was just going to sit him the rest of the year, and so now I have to chew on that for a while, and they're just awful. They're so awful. I don't know that you can really own anybody safely on this team. Even Josh Richardson is a tough own these days. Brutal. Although Derrick Jones Jr. did play 27 minutes in this ball game, he was not good, but a steal and 2 blocks, if he's out there for 20-something, he's going to be sweet. So keep a very close watch on him. Goran Dragic also made his return from injury. He played 16 minutes. He had 4 points on 2 out of 6 shooting and a couple of turnovers. He's a long way from being healthy enough to be fantasy active, but if you're willing to sit on him for about 2 weeks, I think you might get like top 100 guard type stuff out of him. Still, I'd rather keep an eye on Derrick Jones. I think he's the more interesting of those two guys. He played big minutes in this game. Someone should be sitting to allow him to play. Let's see if the Heat actually figure that crap out. Probably not. Boston, I don't care about. They're a pretty standard story. Chicago lost Otto Porter in this game with a leg strain. He's listed as questionable, but I bet he misses a week. What does that mean? Well, Wayne Selden's going to get to play more, but mostly it means more shots for Lauri Markkanen and Zach LaVine. But, of course, the big fantasy story with this team is the continuing strong play of Robin Lopez. 27 minutes in this one. He's been great lately. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that this would be the way we wind down our season. But he's a top 60 guy over his last 4 games. Great percentages. Points, amazingly. Not a ton of rebounds, like his brother. They don't rebound a lot in their old age. Blocking some shots. A couple of assists. Just a nice, solid, middling late-round center. Worth using. Also of note, on the opposite side of the ledger, Chris Dunn has been awful lately. I mean, really epically bad. He's number 118 on the season, but over the last month, he's number 177, and over the games nearing the All-Star break here, he's number 311. It's just really, really bad. It's hard to hold on to, and I don't know if it's about to get better. His assists should be good, but his minutes are trending down, and I don't know what to do. He needs to figure out how he fits. Perhaps the exit of Otto Porter will give him a little bit of a window here. I think you got to hold a tiny bit longer, but if your fantasy playoffs start, say, this week, he's probably a drop, at least if he doesn't play well in their game tonight. That's kind of the barometer at this point. You got to get somebody in there who's doing stuff. He's not. Sacramento, they're not really a story right now. Neither is Oklahoma City on the end of a double overtime back-to-back. Minnesota in Milwaukee. Dario Saric has been a pretty big letdown from a numbers standpoint his last couple of ball games, but he got his 30 minutes in this one, and that's the real key. If he makes any of his shots, it's a really nice game. That's the difference. He had 7, 8, and 3 with a steal and a three-pointer. If he makes another 1 or 2 of threes, then you're talking about 13, 8, and 3 with a steal and 3 threes. That's a great ball game. Let's hope Cat is back. That will obviously change the fortunes of all of these guys. Rob Covington, I think he'll be back right around the turn of the month. Give him about another week, and then let's see where he's sitting. He could be a real big difference maker for a lot of teams. But we're also in head-to-head spots starting to run out of time a little bit. Still, you can't drop that dude. Top 20 guy when he was playing big minutes. And if they dial him back a little bit, he's still a top 40 kind of dude. Derrick Rose, I think they're going to keep him around that 24-minute mark, so I don't think that you can trust him to put up big numbers the rest of the way. Looks like he will do some scoring for you, but that's also not super interesting. Nice to see Niko Mirotic get 18 minutes in his second game with the Bucks, and he played well. 17 and 6 with a steal, 2 blocks, and 3 3-pointers. He's going to get some wide-open looks in this offense. I think they eventually get him up to about 22, 23 minutes a game, and I think he's probably a top 75 guy in that run. That's what we were hoping for. Dallas and Utah. Tim Hardaway Jr. was a lone bright spot on a team that looks really bad right now. Dallas is tanking hard. We'll keep an eye on them, but I might drop everybody outside of Doncic and Hardaway. And Utah, they're very predictable. Finally, Houston and Golden State to wrap things up on our reverse chronological lightning round. Draymond Green turned his ankle. He'll probably miss a game or two. There's no reason for the Warriors to rush anybody back. They've got some teams breathing down their neck in that Western Conference, so who knows? Maybe that will force them to move a little bit quicker. No, I'm not picking up Jordan Bell. He could play 6 minutes in their next ball game. Not worth my time. James Harden sat this one out for the Houston Rockets, and that meant Chris Paul and PJ Tucker both went mega. Chris Paul 23 and 17 in this ball game. PJ Tucker 18 and 10, 4 steals, 2 blocks, and 4 3-pointers. It's amazing how much everybody else has to do when James Harden is not around. Kenneth Faried actually got the start. Houston went big in this game. He played 33 minutes, largely split between power forward and center. He had 20 and 10, but a fairly empty 20 and 10. No steals, no blocks, not good percentages. So it looked great on paper, but in actuality, it didn't really help all that much. Kind of a middling. It's weird to say a 20 and 10 game was sort of middling, but it really was not a particularly helpful fantasy game. I still think Kenneth Faried is droppable because as soon as Harden comes back, he gets wedged back into that 18 to 20 minute role. And that to me is not enough for a guy who will hurt you in free throw percent, who's not great with the defensive stats when his minutes are not massive. And it's mostly at that point field goal percent and rebounds. I think there's guys with better upside out there. Yowza. That's a lot. That was a lot of games. I'm just going to go ahead and say that we covered them all, even if we didn't. I have to. Because frankly, I don't think you guys want to hear me lecture on the weekend anymore. Monday is a very large card again. They're not giving us much rest here. 11 games coming up tonight. Portland is in Cleveland. Obviously, we'll be watching Layman and Cantor for the Cavs. We'll keep an eye on Kevin Love, the other forwards on that team, and if anybody can sort of separate from the pack. Indy, Detroit. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on Wayne Ellington. Golden State, what do they do with Draymond Green? Out for whatever length of time, short, medium, probably not long. Charlotte, does Jeremy Lamb actually get to play a little bit? Is it Miles Bridges' time? I hope somebody will play. That's all I can say on that one. Spurs and Nets, not a whole lot going on there. Phoenix, obviously we're watching Tyler Johnson these days, and a revenge game for Tyler against his old buddies in Miami. The Heat are just brutal, but we'll keep an eye on Derrick Jones Jr. He has massive fantasy upside if they ever were to turn him loose. Philly, we're keeping an eye on Boban. Pelicans, everybody, literally everybody on the team. We want to see if somebody can separate themselves. Atlanta, Bazemore, Herter, who's actually healthy enough to play. Houston, does James Harden get himself back in there? If not, can these other guys keep up their torrid pace? Chicago with Otto Porter out. Can Chris Dunn actually get going a little bit with any kind of wiggle room? Lakers and Grizzlies. Lakers, I'm just not that curious about. Mostly Reggie Bullock. Memphis, you're watching DeLon Wright, Avery Bradley, Jonas Valanciunas, Joakim Noah, Ivan Rabb. There's all the names. Minnesota, does Cat play? Dallas, do they have any chemistry at all? And then with the Clippers, you got Gallo, and you got Lou Williams, but is anybody else worth using besides Pat Beverly in like kind of a punt points build, which, by the way, you guys know I do too frequently. Okay, that was a whopper. I feel tired. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. Let me give you a quick preview of what we got coming up the rest of the week. Tuesday, we'll have a short pod. That's part of our plan going forward. Tuesday and Thursday is going to be a little bit shorter here between now and the end of the regular season. Wednesdays, DFS Day with Micah Patria. Friday, we'll have one with Brew to wrap up the week. You guys know the schedule right now. It's pretty predictable these days as we head into the stretch run. It's all fantasy right now. We don't want to waste any time on anything else. It's about winning. It's winning time, right? At Dan Besbris on Twitter. If you have a moment, give me a follow. Please rate and review the podcast as well. We certainly appreciate that. All the good things you do for us here at Hoop Ball, we are most grateful for. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody. Enjoy the mega card tonight. I'll give you a what to watch for coming up on Twitter as well. And then, of course, any thoughts as we go through the games this evening. We'll talk to you tomorrow, everyone.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.